All right, it's time to talk basketball, off-season basketball. I'm Jose Salviati, editor at thepeachbasket.net. He's Steve Prisciello, a longtime educator, vice principal, high school coach, and athletic director. And this is the 13 Rules Random NBA Thoughts Overtime podcast. During the NBA offseason, we're going to discuss NBA stars from the 60s, 70s, and 80s. And we're going to talk about them by discussing them with someone who watched them play, which to me is objectively pretty cool. What made that guy special? What player today most resembles that player? And what is Steve, who has seen these guys play, what's his greatest memory about that player? To date, we've discussed Wilt Chamberlain, Sam Jones, Rick Barry, Pistol Pete Maravich, Jerry West, John Havlicek, Oscar Robertson, and Bill Russell. All-time greats. Today, we're going to discuss another player who to me has an absolute incredible nickname, following Pistol Pete. This player is an NBA champion in 1973, four-time NBA All-Star, All-NBA First Team, NBA Rookie of the Year, and an NBA Anniversary Team 50th and 75th Best Player. Today, we're discussing the career of Earl the Pearl Monroe. And Earl Monroe is interesting to me because this is a guy, and Steve, you and I were just talking about this. This is a guy I know. I mean, I know the name. I've heard the name. I honestly don't think I can tell you anything about his game, which is embarrassing to me. But listen, I'll be straight. I don't know anything about his game. I never saw him play. I think he's a point guard, and that's about where my knowledge begins and ends. I've done a little bit of research, so I know a little bit more now. But before then, nothing. But this is an NBA all-time great, 50th and 75th anniversary team. Tell us about Earl the Pearl Monroe. Let's start with what made him special. Why is he so good?
He was just one of the greatest one-on-one players that have ever played the game. It started out, he went to Winston-Salem College, which at the time was a D2, and it was in the South. He grew up in Philly, but he went there. Clarence Big House Gaines, who's a Hall of Fame coach, was his coach there, and he played for them. I believe they won the title, I think, his senior year in high school and college. The D2 would be a D2 college. I think it was just called the college division then, but he won the title there, and then he was a first-round pick, second guy taken in the draft, I believe in '67. And after Jimmy Walker, who went to Providence, was a great player too, but he didn't quite have the career in the professionals. But he was the second guy chosen by the Baltimore Bullets. Back then, the Bullets played downtown in Baltimore. And him and another guy you might have heard of, Wes Unseld, were both young, and they were with the Bullets. And the Bullets went from like a mediocre to not a good team. All of a sudden, the next year, they had the best record in the East. They lost in the playoffs to the Knicks, and the Knicks were beaten by the Celtics in that year. It was '69, I believe. And then, but the point being, they took a team like that. Unseld was revered for his quick outlet pass and his rebound. He was only 6'8", but Monroe was just a one-on-one player. Who was unstoppable. It's ironic he didn't make the All-Stars one year, and some household names made it over him in the East. Guys like Tom Van Arsdale and Flynn Robinson, which is wild. With that he didn't make the All-Star team in one of those years, because he did take this Bullet team. Now he lasted with the Bullets for four or 5 years, and I think one year they went to the finals and they lost. They lost in the finals and got swept. But now it might have been his last year with that, with Gene Shue coaching. But they lost in that year, and then after that he wanted money. They didn't get paid a lot. Baltimore was a smaller market. Even then, they had they really didn't want to come up with the money. So now he wanted to get traded. He really wanted to go to Philly, where he lived, and the Bulls. But the Knicks came along and dealt him. And that's where most people remember him. They don't remember those early years when he was a one-man gang, literally taking a team. He did have some other players with him. Gus Johnson, who was a Hall of Famer also. But he was the game. He's what turned that team into a good team. But now with the Knicks ended up getting him. He made a threat even to go to the ABA at the time. I believe
Mm,
Indianapolis, but the Knicks got him for Dave Stallworth and Mike Reardon. Reardon did have a nice career with the Bullets, but Stallworth, nothing. He was the seventh man. But the point becomes, he comes to the Knicks. The big talk is, how could he and Walt Frazier play together?
yeah.
Well, it'll never do. Well, I'll give you a little story, not a little story, but the end of it turns out to this. Very interesting. At the end of it, those two, that tandem is the only tandem in the all-time top 75 players selected. In other words, no other pair of guards ever made it. His scoring went down, and he was
Right.
less and less a one-on-one player, but he was great. And he always would come up with big baskets for the Knicks, and that I remembered real well. And he was always tough. Frazier was better. He was an all-around great, Walt Frazier, but he was just such a great offensive player when they needed it. And everybody said he couldn't defend. He did a decent job as a defender. So he fit into that. And I believe the first year they went to the finals, I think they lost to the Lakers in '72 with the Knicks, when the Lakers had that great team and had that, at the time, record winning streak. And then the next year they did play the Lakers again. They beat the Celtics, in fact, in seven, and right before that. And then they went on to play the Lakers. And the Lakers, they beat the Lakers fairly easily. I believe it was 4-1, and they became the world champions. He continued with the Knicks for a couple more years, and really had a great career, Hall of Fame in 1990, I believe. He made the anniversary team in 50 and 75 with
Yep.
the NBA, and he was just a great player. And what's interesting is how, I think the biggest story when he came to the Knicks is how it didn't matter that he was not the one-on-one player anymore. He could still do it, but it didn't matter as much as the winning. And him and Frazier became, and they're still friends, pretty great friends, but they
Wow.
became a great guard tandem that was really, really difficult to defend.
That's interesting. And this is all new to me, which is really, really cool. I'm looking at Earl's numbers right now. 24 points his rookie year, 25, 23, 21, 21. And then, just like you said, gets traded, kind of falls off a cliff, goes from 21 to 11, 11, 15, 14. Now, today's players aren't going to do that, right? I mean, how do you get a Well, first off, I think even today's GM isn't going to take a ball dominant guard and pair him with a ball dominant guard. How did that even work?
Well, that was, and if I remember right, that was like a big thing and I grew up in the New York area. It was a big thing. These guys will never be able to play together. And they had someone who I consider one of the greatest coaches ever, Red Holzman, coaching it. And Holzman was more of a defensive coach, but he also got guys to play hard, and somehow that fit together. And I think Frazier also helped it. And I think the money wasn't nearly what it is today. So
Yeah.
I think winning was very important, more so than today. I think guys come into the NBA today, yeah, they want to get that first big contract, and they'll worry about winning. And that takes 5 years or so to get that contract. Where then they weren't making money that would be life changing. Where they really don't have to do anything for the rest of their lives. These guys all, when they left the game, they had to find other things to do, to make some money. So it's a different thing then, and winning had much higher value. So him winning a title with the Knicks was just a big thing because of that.
And it sounds to me like that's kind of what made it easier for him as a player to kind of take that back seat to the guy he obviously, I shouldn't say obviously, but I assume he knew this guy's better than me. So I'm going to go ahead and just to be a complimentary piece and win a title.
Better than him in the all-around game. The thing you have to, like, with the Knicks, it always seemed, or Monroe always made big plays. And so down the stretch of a game or something, he would, kind of not take over, but he would get a big basket or two in there. The Knicks were loaded back then. I mean, Dave DeBusschere was a great shooter, great defender. Bradley, I know he's, hyped very well, but I didn't see him. But Willis Reed was great. They were loaded. I mean, think of the team. These are Hall of Famers. In
Yeah.
fact, I believe all five are Hall of Famers. So, it tells you, how good they were. And each of them had to somewhat, you know, let go and with their ego and to win games.
Yeah.
Don't forget, again, and I'm off the subject, but Willis Reed walking out, how many people in today's game would do that? They wouldn't, because he had to get shot up to play that game.
Right.
So the whole, I guess I say that to tell you that the whole game and the attitude around the game was
Yeah.
completely different. Now we're all shocked when we hear a young player talk about, I just want to win. What are you kidding? So it's a different game. And I don't blame them because they want to make their money.
Yeah. Which kind of leads us to a great segue, right? To far and away the best part of this series for me. And that is when we take these all-time greats and try to compare them to a player today. And the way you encapsulated it to me is absolutely perfect. Because we're talking about a player who was an all-star, a rookie of the year, averaging 20 points plus, and then he goes to a team and takes a back seat to a player who's better than him. So who's going to do that today? And a player who values winning over anything else. But that aside, maybe we could just talk about his game, the style of play. Who today is most like Earl Monroe?
This will be the first time I'm prepared for this one. I thought about this a little bit. Allen Iverson, in a lot of ways. In a lot of ways, Monroe, Black Jesus was his name because he was just incredible, schoolyard great and all that. But Monroe, he would get you in the lane and he would like juke you a few times. And the big knock back then was he's a playground player. He was, because it was all playground basketball. He would take you one-on-one and beat you. Iverson did that in a lot of ways. So I guess it would be Iverson, but it'd be very difficult to find anybody, with that one-on-one skill that he had.
And is there anybody, and I think we talked about this before, but skill aside, right, which is tough because that's a big part of what makes him great. Is there anybody today that you think would take a backseat to another player in order to win championships, right? We know Kobe and Shaq, right? They fought. They would have likely won more championships. There's Kobe. If they would have, had that kind of relationship that Earl the Pearl and Walt Frazier had. Anybody would have done that today or could do that today? Do you think?
I think Jaylen Brown has done it.
Oh, good call.
I think he's done it. But don't forget, he's getting big time money.
It makes it easier.
Oh, it makes it real easy, and Boston's a little bit of a different animal because you're nobody unless you win a title.
Yeah.
And now he's got that on his resume, as does Tatum. So that's a whole different thing, than a lot of other places or a lot of other teams. And generally, when two guys like that come together, there's going to be a breakup at some point.
Right.
In today's NBA, where then, Monroe stayed there longer than Frazier. Frazier later in his career was traded to Cleveland, where Monroe was a Knick, through the years.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit different in that way.
Yeah. And for those watching on video, we're showing a few highlights of his game, and dude's slippery, man. I mean, and he seems to be. I mean, I haven't seen one mid-range jump shot. Everything's to the hoop.
Look at the body. Look at the body on him, though. He's got that. And by the way, his big thing. His big thing. He always said, "I can jump. What is it? I can jump. I'll stay up there as long as I have to get the shot off." Because, and if you watch, a lot of his stuff is on the way down, and just he does things that were just incredible.
Yeah.
He was just, when he was with the Bullets, he was just pure fun to watch. And
Yeah.
back then again, they'd have the games on Sunday, and you'd watch them, or a Nick game. See, there he is again, going on the way down shooting.
That's
Um,
so weird. And again, I'll try to describe the shot we just saw. He literally jumped up, and on the way down, it seemed like he clutched the ball and shot it on the way down, and it was swish. I mean, it just went right in. Really odd, but
yeah,
yeah,
he just, it's not a shame. I guess it's great that he played with the Knicks, but it's a shame that he never, like, he in his own way didn't have the shooting range of Maravich, but in his own way could do things with the ball that really we haven't seen much.
yeah,
And that would be, I guess, see, again, and also he had the knack of drawing fouls.
yeah,
So he had the whole package, I guess the best way to put it.
yeah,
And it's a shame, not as a knock to the Knicks, but it's a shame because if he played on teams that where he had to score, wow! I mean, he people would have really
yeah,
understood how great he was.
yeah. I think we've talked before about fit and being on the right team. And I can't help but think that I don't want to speak for Earl Monroe, but he had a great career. He won a championship. I think he's probably really happy with the way things worked out. But to your point, right? Yeah, I think if he was in a different situation, he probably would have continued to average those 20 points that he did the first 4 or 5 years of his career, and we'd be having a different conversation. But all right. Awesome.
Again, though, we for people who are, most people are younger than me, but way younger than me, there was no 3-point shot.
Right.
You
Yeah.
got to
Yeah.
keep telling yourself that when you look at his 24 points a game. Not saying he would be a great 3-point shooter, but the point being there was none. So averaging 24 is pretty good
Yeah.
in the game. And by the way, making him a top 75, I think he was 58th, but making him a top 75 player, even though his numbers weren't good after he left Baltimore, tells you the
Right.
respect that the NBA had for this guy.
Yeah. We're going to leave it with this. And we didn't actually prepare this question, but this is always the last one I ask. When we talk about certain players, there's kind of an iconic moment for each player, right? Kareem's got the hook. Not that we've talked about Kareem, but Jerry West has got that 68-foot shot, whatever it might be. Don Nelson, we've talked about that. Was there a particular moment, a game that you saw, a favorite memory, or something? Because this is where Earl Monroe to me is kind of a mystery, because I can't place him with any particular moment. When you think of Earl Monroe, what comes to mind?
I think about this guy, and back then, it wasn't publicized like things are today. Back then, you had this guy from Winston-Salem playing for Baltimore. And I had never seen anybody, because he had swivel hair. He could do so many different things. And I remember him playing for Baltimore more so. And I remember the Knicks. I saw many more games. But I remember like the game of the week on a Sunday, watching this guy and just the moves and the things he did, just sitting there. And he was a one-man gang offensively.
Yeah.
So that's the thing that really comes to me. With the Knicks, it was more of a 5-man group, and they all could play and they could all score. So it was a little bit different. And even with the Knicks, as time went on, because don't forget, he came after the Knicks won the first championship, after Willis Reed walked out there, and Willis Reed was shot. I don't think he could jump over a phone book after that injury.
Yeah.
But Jerry Lucas came along, and he became their center, and he could shoot from 30 or 20. I mean, he would shoot at the top of the key all night and kill a team. And he was a great rebounder. So it was another Hall of Famer replacing a Hall of Famer, although Willis stuck around for a while. But so they always had 5 great players. If you want to say Bradley was one, but they had 5 great players on the court.
The Allen Iverson example, I'm sorry, the Allen Iverson was really more Baltimore Bullets, Earl Monroe.
Yeah, and that's the part I enjoyed, because like, wow, and you know, I'd look forward when they were on, and they weren't on a lot. Usually it was Boston and Philly, or Boston, you know,
Sure.
they would be on most of the time. But when they were on, you know, I'd look forward to it, or when they played the Knicks going way back, you know. But back then again, if they're playing the Knicks, you only get the away games. We didn't get the home games. So, you know, I naturally, I know Baltimore's on tonight and I want to see it, you know. So that would be, just because he was such a great, just great moves, and just unstoppable going to the basket.
And there it is. Let's end it there. Great exclamation mark at the end of the career of Earl Monroe, from someone who watched him play. I hope you enjoyed learning more about this NBA great. I did. I learned a lot today, which is always pretty cool. If you have somebody you want to learn a little bit more about, if Steve watched him play, we will discuss that player. We're going down the list of the NBA greats. We don't have anybody on tap for next week, but we will. Make sure to add us, subscribe to us, leave us a comment, man. All that stuff helps a lot. We'd love to hear from you if you've got a player in mind. Otherwise, we will pick one and be back next week to talk about another NBA great with someone who watched him play. Thanks for joining us on 13 Rules Overtime. Steve, we'll talk next week.
Take care.